Oh, hello, everybody.
Hello.
How are we this evening?
We are good.
Great. It's finally summer. The kids are out of school. We can all hang out now. Thank you all so much for coming out this evening. I really appreciate it. My name is Sarah Colley. I'm the Community Engagement Coordinator for the Great Falls Public Library. We are here to serve as a connection point to empower the community and enhance the quality of life by providing individuals access to information and social, cultural, and recreational resources. And part of what we do is author talks, but we also bring in community members who have done a lot of research and know what they're talking about and just want to help guide us in some good directions. So just a few housekeeping things before we get started. The restrooms are out the door and to the right, and so is a water fountain. In case of an emergency, we also have the emergency exit out the door to the right and to the right again. Those are the stairs that will lead you up to the first floor to exit through the kids' place. Given the amount of people that we have here, once we get started, I'm probably going to go unlock those doors, turn off the alarms, so we can exit that way if we want, because otherwise the elevator takes approximately 30 years. So that's all the housekeeping stuff. Thank you all again for coming out. And today we have Aedan Bingham. Aedan is a recent graduate of C.M. Russell High School. Woo! Recent by like last week? Yeah. And he is planning to attend the Worcester Polytech Institute in Massachusetts this fall. For this program, Aedan is going to be leading us in a discussion and a program based on hours of his research regarding political polarization. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you for coming out.
Yeah, I did say first, the school's pronounced in a Boston accent. It's Worcester. Worcester. All right, but yeah.
It's like the sauce.
Yeah, but yeah, thank you for having me. You know, I've taken various government and politics classes. I'm interning for a group that's nonpartisan, that's involved in politics, and I've been researching this for about half a year now, on and off. And you know, this issue has not just been a growing presence in my life, it's been a growing presence within our nation for the last couple of decades, really, since the 1970s. And this is what we're here to talk about, and to include its effects and some solutions that there are. So first off, obviously, what is it? We're going to break this down a bit. So all types of polarization exist in society. You have social, economic, political, religious, all types. But the political polarization in the U.S. has been of kind of extreme concern. It's been very abnormal. So then what increases this kind of polarization? First off, we have what's called affective polarization. This is the psychological side of it. And the psychological polarization, how much society people think is polarized. So people think society is a lot more polarized than it actually is. So the actual data is a lot lower than what people think. And because of this, it just feeds on itself. It just increases polarization. Secondly, a bit more clear of a term here, there's political incentives. So there's a couple good examples of this. First off, we have elections. And in elections, quite often, we'll have two candidates of the same party running for a seat. And one will be, a candidate that has, let's just say, a conservative candidate. They have all these conservative values, but let's say they're more leftist on economic policies. But then let's have another candidate that is completely conservative. So they go into an election, and the one candidate that is fully conservative can say, hey, that candidate is not completely on our side. So the more extreme candidate, the candidate that's more on one side, usually wins the elections because of those tiny minute details. Another point on this is we have K Street, which is, there's a lot of lobbyists from big corporations that lobby for laws that benefit their companies. So there might be a big group that promotes lawyers that they want to reduce the regulations on all the paperwork they have to do. And they might be trying to get to congressmen and women to try to bring these laws into place that would reduce these regulations. And by reducing these regulations, these lobbyists will say, hey, when your election comes up in a few years, a few months, we'll help you out with that. So it's, these benefits side on side that they give to each other that incentivizes this polarization. Thirdly here, there's a lot of psychological negatives. There's greater distrust, less cooperation, less dishonesty in society. And then fourthly here, we have the media. The media is playing a big role. So we have what are called echo chambers and media bubbles. You might have heard of that. They're pretty much the same thing. But a lot of people, their groups that they talk with, they're mostly the same ideology. They sway a bit, but there's no one or two people that really come in and, pose big questions that fundamentally change and make them think differently about issues. And it's not having these people that change our ideas, that question our very mindsets, that we need to have in our lives. And another point on this, we have catered content. AI, algorithms, the internet plays such a big role now. And all these companies that want you on their websites, they want to keep you on their websites to make more money. And the best way to keep you on their websites is to give you information that caters most to your ideologies. So it's just conforming more and more your opinions and your ideas, and it's just pounding them into place without questioning them at all. Here's a couple graphs. This is what's going on in America as a whole. So we have 1994 on the top left here, and it moves down to 2017. There's not a whole ton of data years-wise, but we see the median Democrat and the median Republican mostly stay pretty close to the center here throughout all of this. But when we move to 2017 on the bottom right, the medians have gone way out to the side. But what's more important than this is the mixed aspect here, this dark blue in the middle. And that's, these are people that are congressmen, congresswomen, that, they might be labeled as a Democrat, but they might have right-leaning values. And so it's these kinds of people that are in this mixed group that are able to cooperate across the aisle in our Congress in DC. And we see this mixed population really go down over time. It's about 50% of what it was in 1994 to 1917, and that's very concerning. This also goes to show more of what the people in America think about political polarization. So within the Republican Party, about 85%, 86% of people have an unfavorable view of the Democratic Party. Well, in the Republican Party, about 85% as well have an unfavorable view of the Republican Party. And having opposing ideologies is normal, but disliking the other side is something else. It's deeper than that. But there's a bigger point here. So we see independence. It's this gray dotted line in the middle. For Democrats, it mostly stays around 50%. Around 50% of independents have an unfavorable view of the Democratic Party. But back in 1994, only 24% of independents had an unfavorable view of the Republican Party, but now that's increased to 56%. So we have the overall view of the party system in general becoming more and more unfavorable. And, this even goes that within independence, dislike is increasing within our society. So, why does this matter? So, political polarization, it's increasing at an exponential rate. It's not linear. People are pitted against each other in this, and this is kind of a more abstract point, but all societies, nations, they all fall eventually. It's just time, but it's the principles and lessons that survive each entity that go on to define the future. And there's several examples of this, like the British Empire. They mainly set global trade as a major factor in today's society. Everything today is based off trade. And this is what they did for today. That's how they define the future. And then a lot of things is people, they really think that their country is invincible, that it's, it's not going to fall, it's not going to misstep. But we've seen stuff like this happen before, like India and Pakistan in 1947 when partition happened. The countries split apart, and it was fundamentally because of religious issues, but that went out into political issues. And more points we have here is, we should be grateful that this isn't an issue that is more prevalent in our lives, that it's not economic as well, that it's not, all these factors to a heightened degree. And we also need to see that dark money plays a big issue here. So dark money is money that goes into elections to support campaigns. And no one knows where some of this money is coming from because of a recent Supreme Court decision. And this dark money gives unidentifiable and external sources means to influence our democracy. Like there was election interference in 2016 that it really just created discontent between people in the US. And we really think that internally this political polarization is an issue, but we have external influences that are pushing up political polarization as well. And just a thought experiment here, you want to think to yourself, what do you want left over for future generations, and what do you want them to see you as? And here's another really good graph showing what's happened in Congress. So on the left we have the Senate, and on the right we have the House of Representatives. In both chambers, the median Democrat and the median Republican mostly stays in the same. But we see the middle really fall out. And this is in the House on the right here. This is huge. There's almost no middle here by 2010, 2012. And this is really critical because there's no really person in the middle to deal make and cross-aisle vote to get big issues across and passed into law. And so what are the, this is a generally increasing issue, and I'll have more on that on the next slide a bit as well. So this is just a few facts about, not facts, but generalizations about, your age in general and how it relates to where you stand politically. So, there's a cycle. Most youth really don't care too much about what's going on in politics. They can't vote yet. But once you become middle-aged, you start to have more a stake in the process. You give a lot of your wages to the government. So you want to, know what it's doing with your money and have an effect on it. But the older you get, often the more opinionized you become. And then as we move to the government side of things, as we've seen in the previous graph, this issue's been exponentially exasperating over time. Ideologies have gone further to either side, and the middle is nearly gone because of things like gerrymandering and political incentives. There's too high of an incumbency advantage in our government. So an incumbency advantage is an interesting data point to take this as. So incumbency advantage is the rate at which our elected representatives can stay in office for additional terms if they choose to. So in the 1800s, their turnover rate here was about 45%. We move up to the 1940s, it's in the 80% range, but in the 2010s, it's 95%. About 95% of our elected officials, if they want to stay in office, they can. It's uncompetitive. And that's a big issue because when things are competitive, a lot more gets done. We're a lot more productive and efficient. And, here's some gerrymandering. I briefly mentioned this. This is the redrawing of district lines. So in Montana, we have 2 districts. One is the left side of the state. They have elected Daines as their senator, and the right, we have elected Tester as the representative. And here this goes to see how these districts that elect officials to our national government, how these districts can be manipulated to favor one side. So we see here that there are 60% blue tiles, 40% red tiles. So by majority vote, blue tiles would win, right? But no, if we move over here to the right, if they gerrymander the districts, they can manipulate it so there's 3 red districts and 2 blue districts with majority. So here, the red would win, and that is a big issue. And what are the effects here? So there's a lot more political violence than there used to be, and we have civility declining overall. There's less respect and dignity between the population. It's been going down, and this leads to more tenacious workspaces, strained family ties, and more. And like I said, political polarization is very incentivized, and it's a cycle that won't stop until we do something about it. And lastly here, because of polarization, we've seen some weird effects in Congress. And some members of a party will go and vote on the other side of the aisle because most often re-election incentives. And this random and risky practice is really hurting our Congress because it's leading to unstable voting and greater distrust. Deals and agreements in Congress aren't as honored as they used to be in decades past. And while it's excellent to have this cross-aisle voting, it will only hurt people's perception of Congress in these small doses. We have to go all in. And then here we have the political violence that's going on. So we have these total hate crimes per year. In 2001 it was about 10,000 a year, but we moved to 2014 and we hit a low point. It took us 13 years to about half our cases of hate crimes. But we see on this graph, that number got back up to 10,000 cases in 5 years. It took 13 years to get down to 5,000, but it took 5 years to get back up to that same number. That's really worrying. This number is still going up today, and this is just really a good health indicator of our nation. It's not looking very good. So I did a bit of research and polling of my own over the last few months, and these are just a few numbers that I've directly pulled from my polling, and they really just show some interesting facts. So we see that there's extremely low trust in politicians. I mean, we elect these people. We should be trusting them. Secondly, at large, people fear that the other party will act in ways that will violate our constitutional principles. There's a psychological fear factor going on between people in parties. And this also kind of plays into effective polarization, like I was mentioning earlier. And then thirdly here, there's a low positivity towards the party system overall. And this negative and hatred-based U.S. politics just shows what it's become, and its effect is spreading to everyday people. Now, I know a lot of this sounds pretty gloomy. It's not great, but there are some solutions. So one of the main, I used about 5 to 7 papers. This was a big one. This is about 100 pages. And she wrote, Rachel Kleinfeld wrote this. It was pretty good. And these are the ones that I thought were best that she came up with. First, we have ranked choice voting. It's proven to work. They've implemented it in Alaska. They're trying to get it to go in other states. And it's pretty cheap. And people that are using these ranked choice voting systems, these states, their people are overall happier with their politics locally and nationally. And then secondly here, we see that appointments to the Supreme Court are becoming very politicized. They're becoming sort of like reality TV shows or comedies for people. And this is because in these appointment processes, each side tries to humiliate the other. And appointing judges to the Supreme Court should be a pretty dutiful act of the Senate, and it should be handled with diligence and constitutionality. But it seems like it's becoming a media stunt for one party. Then thirdly here, this is a pretty abstract idea as well. We don't have to do it, but we can redefine what idea America is. We can try to bring it to a more consumer-based view, or we can become, seen more as an international judge. And the more we change the image, the more we can, in effect, change ourselves. And then lastly here on this slide, we have, no matter where you are in the political continuum, we all share a fundamental set of principles. Let's uphold these principles and recognize that we're all more similar than we are different. So I also came up with a broad list of my own solutions, a lot longer than what's on this slide. And I'm just going to say a few of the prominent ones, not even all the ones on this slide, because that take way too long. So first off, collaborative action. Secondly, altering political structures. And thirdly, we need to create more opportunities to compromise. So, like I'm saying with collaborative action, so not just parties and party candidates need to start collaborating together. We need to have communities and purpose of greater goals collaborate together. And we need to bring people of all sides together to increase voter turnout. We need to combat poverty, and we need to increase